Hello, welcome to our Feminism in TTRPGs panel for Dork Expo. I will be your moderator today, Christine, also known as Lady Liliana. But I just want to start with a very quick shout out to our sponsor before getting into the meat of the panel. So a big thank you to Bookworm Games for being our sponsor this month. You can go to bookwormgames.com to check out their really cool dice and use code Dork Tales to save 10%, which is awesome. So you should totally go check out their stuff because they have amazing pretty click-clacks. And they're coming out with some new stuff like quest chests, candles, all sorts of things. And they've got great dice. They're so pretty. So go check them out. But let's get into the panel and meet our people. But as I said, I'm Christine. I'm a member of Dork Tales. You can find me as Lady Liliana on Twitch, where I also do streaming of Guild Wars and other video games. Let's throw it over to Amy.
Oh god, I'm not prepared. I just blinded myself several times trying to set up a backup light. Don't worry about it. It's fine. I am Amy. My pronouns are she, her, or they, them. I go by Paradoxical Ghoul on Twitch. I occasionally will stream video games terribly on my own channel and with a lot of screaming because I'm bad at them. And I live on the Dork Tales Discord because I run the place, and I'm a regular on Dork Tales as one of the members, etc., etc., etc. I'm here all the time, pretty much.
Awesome. That's which I did forget, as being moderator is very unusual for me. I forgot to say my own pronouns, which are she, her. Millie.
Hi, I'm Millie and/or Bunny-Hearted. My pronouns are she and her or they and them. I guess I'm like a 90s anime styled retro comfort VTuber over at twitch.tv/Bunny-Hearted. And I do my best to build an inclusive and welcoming kind of community over there. But other than that, I'm, trans, gay, chronically ill, a huge tabletop and role-playing game fan, a member of Dork Tales, and like cool as hell. So there's that too.
Legit.
Yeah, very, very much. Actually, hang on, like
cool
as hell. There we go. Cool as hell. Let's go.
Excellent. Let's go down to Ivy.
Hi, I'm Ivy. My pronouns are she, her. I'm Gamer the Girl everywhere else that you can possibly find me on the internet. I'm a professional DM. I DM over at Dice Cream Sandwich. I'm the CEO of the Crit Awards and their founder, as well as the CEO and founder, one of the founding members of Rolling for Charity, where we do 24-hour TTRPG streams raising money for Doctors Without Borders, Ukraine, and other charities. And I'm the PR coordinator over at Geek Girl Con in Seattle.
Awesome. And over to Ashley.
Oh my gosh. Hi, guys. If we're pulling out the sunglasses, Hi, my name is Ashley. I'm the Dungeon Master for Fayfinders. My brain just shut down because of how cool I am, and I can't see as well. I'm the Dungeon Master for Fayfinders. So you can catch us anywhere you listen to podcasts, as well as we're on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. We're a fun time. My pronouns are she, her.
Awesome. And last but certainly not least, Kel.
Hi, it's me, Kel, from up the road. I use she, her pronouns. You last saw me bright and early this morning for Wake Up and Makeup with Amy and some other fun folks. And I'm... what do I bring to this other than being a girl? I'm criminologist by education, so I have a background in social theory, psychological theory, intersectionality, feminism, and other social issues. So there's my bit. I worked in rehab for a few years and have worked with street-involved people. So that's my jam. And I work at a mall.
Awesome. You're awesome, Kel.
Thanks.
But yeah, so we're going to talk about feminism in TTRPGs. We had a little bit of discussion in the Discord for this that we wanted to start with maybe a bit of a definition of feminism, how it's connected to role play, why it's important, that sort of thing. So I'm going to throw it back to you guys at this point. This is kind of your panel. I'm just here to keep you on track.
I wish you luck.
So, Bunny, you're the one who actually threw out the definition idea. So,
no, damn. All right. I'm gonna take a shot at it here, and I'm gonna try not to talk for 30 minutes. Okay, so I suppose in my mind, wait, am I doing definition or definition and connection to role playing games?
Maybe
I'll start with definition.
let's start with a
maybe
definition.
we can build up,
and then
because
we
I'm
can
sure
try
there
it.
will be additions to it. So, okay, awesome. So I guess in my mind, I think feminism is a very broad term. Overall, in how many people mean it, it's sort of, a movement that seeks the equality of quote unquote the sexes or the genders, and maybe like the changing or the dismantlement of a system known as patriarchy, where positions of power, control, et cetera, are, mostly exclusively held by cis men. Personally, I'm a lot more like destruct the system about it than, make more of us a little bit more equal within it. I think, effective feminism needs to be like intersectional. So that I guess means it takes into account, like social and political classifications, like your identities. So stuff beyond just like a white, neurotypical able-bodied cis woman, when building an understanding of how like oppression touches and impacts all of us under a patriarchal system. And I feel like again, in order to be effective and of any use at all, it really needs to be part of a broader struggle against, the additional structures of like class and race and all of those kind of things. I hope that covered some broad strokes, and that other folks feel happy to jump in with additional info.
I feel like that gives us a starting point. Anybody else have anything to weigh in on that?
I'm completely in agreement with Millie/Bunny. Intersectionality is a huge thing. It's a huge issue. We don't actually say the word a lot, I find, but it's present in a lot of our discussions, especially around cisgender versus trans, and it brings up for me like the old debates between radical feminism and traditional feminism, and I find myself moving closer and closer to that radical feminism perspective, because it's like, yeah, we have to. Feminism is more than just what the snapshot of feminism from back in the day. It's changing, it's evolving, society's changing and evolving, and we have to do so with it. And smash the patriarchy, yes, down for that.
Yeah.
I think to tag on to that, my kind of perspective of feminism is really, really rooted in archaeology. As an archaeologist, is the way that we view it, and as a feminist archaeologist, it's the most frustrating thing to study, because it's supposed to be you're supposed to be looking at everything from a unbiased perspective. And for me, when I'm looking at not just history, but also the world, I'm just seeing all of these biased narratives leaning towards men, and women have to do so much more. And it's not just women, it's also, people of other genders, like intersex and gender fluidity and etc. We could go on forever. But also like races and age and all these sort of classifications. So it's really just, if you are not an adult, straight, white, cis, able-bodied man, there's less opportunity. So for me, it's kind of feminism is raising that equality and equity.
Yeah, especially with like how in a lot of that the unconscious bias is to default to pursuing male, regardless of like the fact, especially when it comes to like, say, identifying bone collections and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
There are ways to potentially identify a feminine person, but they're not that accurate. There's no really solid way to be able to tell, and by default they tend to switch to the other direction then.
Well, and like a skeleton's only one part of a person's story. There's massive amounts of variety in human skeletal structure. But this is like an ongoing, constant, hellish debate that the trans community is being subjected to for some reason right now. So I don't need to go into it. But oh my goodness, it is obnoxiously large.
In osteology,
so much that could go into there.
In osteology, the biggest thing that we are being told, so osteology is the examination of human bones, is we're looking at a biological sex. You cannot tell what they did in their life and how they identified. We are seeing, can they pop a baby out or not? That's really all we're defining.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I am resisting the urge to offer some pushback on the concept of a binary biological sex, but know that I am resisting that urge because I want us to get into different topics of conversation around tabletop gaming. But yes, bimodal systems, cool and
True.
good. Binary systems, totally fake.
Suffice to say, there's more than just a biological sex definition at this point. As we learn more and more about the human condition, there is a lot of variety and spectrum to all of us that we did
Yeah,
not used to identify.
Think how boring
Yeah.
the world would be if there really was just like one option or two. Like it's just like no.
Disgusting.
Mhm.
Like it's just boring. No,
Yeah.
I don't like it.
Yeah. Agreed.
No more.
Sword?
Oh my gosh, I'm here for the sword. Let's go.
I didn't know we could bring weapons to this discussion.
I don't have a weapon. I just have a curse. Like I don't know what I'm supposed to do here.
I mean, I feel like Kirby could be a weapon.
Yeah.
in the right
Oh,
hands.
yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a bit of a working definition of feminism, but I guess why is it important in TTRPGs and how do you bring it in? Like, well, in a way that's not just like people are just going to be thinking that you're just doing it for the performance sake type thing.
But it's not. It's all storytelling is about, it's rooted in history for some to some degree, and it reflects the society that either you do live in or you'd like to live in. It reflects something about who the storytellers are, and if we don't include that, we're doing a huge injustice to the people who aren't represented. And yes, it's difficult. I'm unfortunately looking at all of us, and yes, oh look, we're all white girls, females, persons. We're all white, and it's like, okay, how do we encourage people from a minority ethnic background? Be open to it. Just be open to it. Encourage it. We actively encourage different people to participate in our groups, and we're welcoming of anybody. Just please join. Please join us. We really want you.
Because we have different backgrounds and perspectives of how the world works because of the way we've grown up and the privileges we've had. Like I mean, I'm not gonna generalize for everyone, but at least I can say I'm never gonna have to worry about being singled out, at least where I live, for my ethnicity. Like that's not something I'm gonna have to worry about. I do have to worry about being singled out as a woman and as a queer person. That is something I have to worry about. So there's different privileges and lack thereof that we all have kind of grown up with. And yeah, I want more diversity. It's the coolest thing. I want to know more about you. I want to know more about what you want to bring to the table because you have a completely different perspective, and that is the most fascinating thing.
Absolutely.
Bunny,
we want to
raise your
see
hand.
more people.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't
okay,
want
Bunny.
to. I think I've got some lag. I don't want to talk over anyone, so I figured I would just put myself in the queue.
Go for it.
Oh no, I've been queued. I was unprepared for this moment.
You have reached the top of the queue, Bunny.
I think that you two are really kind of onto something here, though, right? Because like many other spaces, tabletop gaming has traditionally been very dominated by like a certain type of person, and full of a certain type of story featuring primarily that certain type of person. And like I think the majority of those people and those stories are rad as heck, but like the tabletop space is really has long missed the opportunity to have more people and more stories around the table. And like I think like a feminist understanding, in particular, of course, like an intersectional one, is really like an integral part of making that happen. I think it's like the bridge that you can use to like make your space even possible to tell, like you make your space even possible, make it possible to even tell different kinds of stories at your space. Is starting with the understanding of what stories are there, why those are the stories that are there, breaking down like who is in that space, who feels safe and comfortable and allowed in that space, who has been given the microphone for the last 40 years, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and the more we
Yeah.
start actually having the conversations and bringing it in, the more it starts taking root, because that's how it works. You talk about it and it becomes more real.
Well, and I'd say for like the last, I don't know, 50, 60 plus years of fantasy, science fiction, etc., women have basically been a placeholder as a prize, or the thing that the guy has to go
Mhm.
rescue, like the point of their
Yes.
hero's journey. So it's nice to start trying to push more of, well, those women have their own stories and they're not just the helpless screaming thing that they have to go rescue.
And not just Lara Croft with big tits.
That too. The triangle tits are. Well,
Yep.
Wow, wow.
I mean,
Can only do so
at
much.
least,
polygon
we've moved to
time, I guess.
higher polygon counts.
Okay,
Our
so
resolution's
I don't know about
better
the rest of you, but I kind of grew up under a rock in a weird way. So I didn't have TV. I had the books at my library that I picked based on what I was interested in. So I pretty much almost exclusively read like strong female protagonists. And then the only TV shows I had access to regularly were Star Trek Voyager, Relic Hunter, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and a couple others that. So the majority of my like media like characters of power were strong women. So it was a real trip once I realized that was not the norm. So
I
I'm
wish
always
I had
looking for more
had
of
that. Wow, I wish I grew up with that.
I kind of had the same
Mhm, yeah.
experience as you, Amy, of having a father who put in front of me very strong female roles, like Wonder Woman, like the old classic Wonder Woman with Linda Carter, or Voyager was my top like Star Trek of any sort. And so I'm very lucky to be able to do that, as well as being a huge comic nerd and reading about those strong female characters in a time when there was a lot of male characters as well, such as Superman and things like that. But I have kind of a similar experience. So it did surprise me, but I was still aware of going into the comic book stores and being immediately the odd one out, and having that very strange experience of walking into a crowd of men who may presume that you're not there fully for why you're actually there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I stand Captain Janeway. Just love.
My-
So much
my-
love.
My first crush was 7 of 9, so like I feel that.
I definitely think
Valid.
Oh my god, yes.
I remember when, because like I grew up with the opposite, because my parents were very much like, Ashley, you're a girl, you cross your legs when you sit, you need to do this, and like it's like the most frustrating thing. And I remember when Princess and the Frog came out, I lost my marbles, because this was like the first time I had seen a woman in like pop culture be exceedingly like, no, I'm no. I'm doing my own thing. I'm my own independent person. This is what I want, and I'm going to get it myself, and I do not need the help from a man. And it was just like, oh, it was the most amazing thing. And I was like, I want to be Tiana.
It's a weird experience because even though I had in like my immediate film and those strong influences of comics and shows, I was raised Southern Baptist, so I was constantly having to push back against the classic Christian feminism, that they present to you. So it was a very interesting thing of having to fight that while simultaneously being very heavily involved in church. I'm no longer, but it was a very, like, the duality was very stark, and as I learned and grew up.
Avi, you need a man to get to heaven. Is that what?
The worst thing
He
I've
needs to
heard.
raise you to
The
Jesus.
worst thing I heard was something that says, "When I die, and I'm almost as good as a man." So you're not far off.
Oh no, yeah, we had
Wow.
videos in Catholic school where they were like, "You need a man to get to heaven.
Oh, yes.
You're all going to hell without a man," and it was just like sitting there like, "Well, I'm gay. My friends had premarital
That's
sex."
fine. It'll be more fun elsewhere.
Yeah, my friend who went to the Catholic high school, they had more teen pregnancies at graduation than my high school did. I'm just like, what are y'all doing? She's
think it's the
like,
funniest
I don't
thing.
know.
I think it's so funny watching
I
these
feel like-
kids.
Right?
I'm like, you are the wildest people I've ever met in my life, and the least Catholic I've ever met in my life.
Right? They drink so much. I'm just like, what is wrong with you people? That's so funny because I was actually with her just yesterday and realizing, oh my gosh, we've known each other for 35 years, and this is like, yeah, our high school differences were so vastly different, and I mean, and going back to your childhood and your upbringing and your influences, yes, I still came from a family where that traditional family values kind of model was set for me, but I was raised by a single mom. My parents separated and divorced when I was 3. I remember like one Christmas as a toddler with my dad, and so I always had my mom fixed the car. My mom had her own workshop. My mom fixed my bike. My mom built cabinets and things. It's like, so it was this strange mix of messages saying like, oh, well, you got to get married, got to have a husband. I'm like, you're divorced and have 2 kids. And I'm 9. And it's like, I am not getting married. No, thank you. That's not happening. Because it's like, why? I don't need to. I'm going to have a job. I'm going to have a career. And that's that. And then my mother said, I think I failed you. It's like, no, you opened it up, gave me the tools to do it myself. It's like, thank you. It's like, oh, I didn't think of it that way. Yeah.
So I feel like
But still,
that all is kind of really showing how much the importance of representation really
Absolutely.
matters, to see options represented in media, etc. That's not just one flavor. And I think like we're naming a lot of shows and whatnot that did have some strong female representation, but there was also like a lot of like, I would say, I don't know, like mainstream movies in particular were pretty bad for it overall. And so that's why it's so important to have it in other stuff like games, books, and various other shows, just to have options for what you can be, that you are not a one-dimensional character that exists for somebody else's purpose.
Well, it makes me think about the novelty of when Sailor Moon came out. Like, that was so different of like just
Girly
And
girl obsessed with boys, but also able to do the shit and be the main character.
inclusion of a
Yeah.
gay couple like that.
Yeah.
The
Yep.
United
Mhm.
States went, no, they're cousins. It's like, that's
Of course, they're
Oh,
no,
yeah,
made it
no,
worse.
no.
I think
that was
even,
the
even
start of
the,
my,
yeah, even the
my
original
PR.
manga artist had to come out and say, no, they're a couple. They're not
Yeah.
cousins. What's wrong with you?
Well, and it's just interesting too that there's such this like shit. That's just a whole thing about censorship and whatnot as well,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
norms of different countries, but also that it was okay, but also that's not 100% okay in that culture either, which is very interesting to see it come out and then get censored by the US. And
I think that's the biggest
Mhm.
thing about representing women in narrative. Just in general, is the way that you portray them. They
And who's
can be
portraying them?
stereotypes. That's not saying like women can't be stereotypes. Like I'm a very like I love pink and I like flowers and I get so excited. Like I do that, but that doesn't mean that I can't be tough and I can't. Like I remember having someone tell me that I shouldn't be playing hockey. I played hockey for 13 years all throughout school. Someone told me I shouldn't be playing hockey because I'm a girl and it's a boy sport. And
Mhm.
like it's like, no, we are able to be anything, same as boys can. And that also goes, I think toxic masculinity is also another thing to remember, is that we're all being pushed into these social categories and you do not have to be in these social categories.
No.
And I know for me, in the work I do, as a feminist archaeologist, a lot of the work I've been doing is within Minoan culture. And there's so much evidence that they were in charge and they had control. But because of the early research, they're like, no, women stayed in the home. They took care of the children and the men. And I'm like, where? where's your evidence? But we want to keep perpetuating this storyline. People want to keep these stories because it's working for them. And when I say them, I mostly mean C-spine hetero body man.
I think something really interesting that's sort of between the lines there too is that they're trying to pretend these stories are a lot older than they are, and a lot more natural and a lot more traditional than they are. It's just like when they encounter, buried ancient Egyptian husbands and they were like, and they were brothers. Or they talk about like, ancient Scythian warrior trans women or tons of like queer and trans people in bajillions of different cultures all across the world. And they're like, they were definitely not real. And if they were persecuted.
They were just a couple of spinsters living together, sharing their funds.
Of course,
They're just
exactly.
rude.
Their whole life, they only had one bedroom though, which is kind of odd, but
They're
they just didn't have money, right?
Yeah, for some, I mean, they named their cat
Very
Sabo, but
poor.
that can't mean anything, of course. But like I think that even in some ways really highlights the importance of stories when building this kind of narratives about what a person can be, right? Because we're basically taught that there's two ways to have a body. There's two ways to have a gender, to be a person. There's two ways to act. There's sort of two life stories that are deeply connected in this long-standing, ancient, traditional kind of way. And it's all total bullshit. But there are people that benefit from that story being perpetuated and made to seem like it's this eternal kind of legendary thing. I'm going to try not to talk for 7 minutes here. But let's circle back for one moment because
No, I
we
love
said the
when you
words
talk.
toxic masculinity, and I know a lot of people interpret that as like an attack on the idea of being a guy. But toxic masculinity is, to be honest, a lot of the ways that the ideas of what a guy is can harm men. Cis men and trans men, masculine people in general. It's the ways that it forces them into this like sort of box that they may not really live in. That they cut off bits of themselves to fit this image that they think they're supposed to fit, just like women and trans people and everyone else does under this sort of model. And it's a term that a lot of people really like seem to run away from the moment it's brought up. And it's like, no, this is a term in your favor. That's why they're really like bad mouthing it because they don't want you to research what this actually means. So just wanted to say that just in case anyone heard the words toxic masculinity in the VOD and was like, whoa, oh my gosh, these feminists are the bad kind.
No.
Yeah, I think it's a good
Well,
point.
yeah, I actually did want to circle back to that because in a lot of ways, the topic of feminism is not just about women. Feminism in and of itself, like that we're reaching for equality and equity, also helps free men from these little narrow boxes that say you can't cry, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, because it wouldn't be masculine enough.
Yeah. The label is about the focus on the axis of oppression, not the only people it benefits.
Like if you are a guy and you identify as a guy and you do something, it is now automatically a guy's activity because you're doing it. Duh.
Yeah.
What?
I think a good example of toxic masculinity, I think just to define it a little more, is men being told that they can't be sensitive and they have to, like, especially with their emotions. I used to do a lot of fundraising for mental health and like reaching out, and you have all your numbers and stuff when you're talking to people, but it's mostly there's a huge gap between the kind of people going to therapy and getting help. And that's not how it actually is. Like, men can have mental health issues, but it's because we're perpetuating a stereotype that men have to be strong and mentally sound, and it's only women who are allowed to cry, that they can't go and get help. And that men are allowed to get help. You are allowed to feel bad. You're allowed to feel sad. You're allowed to feel confused. And it's so important that you feel okay. And that is the thing. That is toxic masculinity forcing this stereotype.
I'm really glad that you went into that example.
Oh, yeah.
I think you phrased that way better than I probably could have. I feel like it's ridiculous that we have something that's like such an obvious and simple biological need, like crying to work out the hormones and all of that stuff in our system that help us to process the things that we're feeling. And we've said, you can't do that. You have to be stuck in this cycle of like a lack of emotional release. That is so bizarre.
How dare you use this thing that works gives you like helps you, like
why this thing you've evolved to do to mitigate this.
Stop being hysterical. Whoa.
Yeah. Like, as you were saying that, like they're like, oh, women, like guys can't be this thing, but women can, but they kind of can't either, because it's like, oh, that's something only women do, but also they're looked down on it for that. It's like, well, You just
You're a
made
hysterical
that completely
woman.
arbitrary because we've changed the rules of what can and cannot be something that a woman does. And
Mhm.
you're like, oh no, women do this now, so we can't do that anymore. So we're gonna go do this other thing. And it's just like, it just come on.
It's an endless cycle. And
oh my God.
Mhm.
an example of it being good, just because I know I went down like a bit of a sad rabbit hole. One of my last D&D sessions, my character died, and we were all sitting at the table looking at each other. Like people were tearing up, and like a good like it's four of us playing, and then the DM, and I'm staring into my friend's eyes, and we're tearing up, and he is not afraid to be staring at me, tearing up as we're like, we don't want to let her go. And I think that was fantastic. Like no one's hiding behind anything. We were so
Mhm.
in it.
So that's really one of the like places that stuff like D&D, TTRPGs are really valuable because it gives you a place to explore. And I think that's why it's so important also to just really think when you're doing stuff, when you're creating NPCs, etc., that you're thinking about stuff like feminism and toxic masculinity and how to portray your NPCs. Like, go ahead and portray a stereotype. As long as you're not portraying that as the only stereotype of all women or all men type thing. Like, it's great to have the Conan the Barbarians, but also the small, skinny man shouldn't be the villain every time either. Like, which was a very common thing in 70s, 80s type media, 90s media, is that
yeah.
the buff, strong, blonde dude was the hero every time. Like, or the chick that got rescued every time was like stacked in curly blonde hair or something. Like, it's fine to use those, but just don't use them for everything. Like, mix it up, combine things, go for different routes, because it gives a safe place. And that's really what anything RPG really should be. It's a place to express and like try things safely.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm just thinking like having characters that like even just NPCs or in your own backstory that are like diverse and varied, like just like, okay, maybe the character, I guess, because also the common thing where it's like, oh, does this character even have a living, it's like, oh, the mother is dead, so on and so forth, and you're like, why? But why is this a thing? Or but like having like a living parent that is like wholesome and there and like is supportive, like a single mom who is like actively a really solid support for your adventurer or whoever, and allowing that to be part of your story. And like, or the single dad who takes on those roles, and it's like, we don't see enough of that, I don't think.
I just feel like I need to shout out an NPC now because you brought that up. We have an
Please
NPC
do.
in a game that I play. And she was someone's like nanny growing up who's just still around. And her name's Lyra. And every time we come visit her, she brings out like scones, she brings out cookies. And we're like, this is a safe place for us. Like, we only meet in this house. We have no other like meeting location. We're like, we come here, we feel comfortable. Lyra makes us tea. We're okay. And that's so good. Like, you're allowed to have these things. Yes. I remember seeing a tweet, I think it was by like Liam O'Brien or Marisha. It could have been back and forth about how like happy people don't adventure. Maybe we do. Maybe we can add a little bit of happiness in there for emotional support.
As a treat.
Yes.
Oh yeah, you have to have something to live for.
Could you imagine if you were depressed the entire time you were adventuring? Like, that's
Well, that's the thing, is like, I feel like that's maybe not a great representation of how depression works either.
no,
Because like,
Mm-mm.
like, a lot of people tend to think, I think, that their character should have a tragic backstory or something. You don't have to. But also, sometimes the amount of tragedy that I see in some backstories, I'm like, how are you not catatonic at this point, just with how much shit you've dealt with? Like, I get that some people do actually like deal with that level of bad luck constantly, time after time after time,
Trauma.
and somehow still exist as people and competency. But I'm like, I feel like for myself, I would just be curled up in a corner, just being like, going to work and just being like, leave me alone, world.
Don't be afraid to make a fun backstory. That's a big thing. I made a character who was like resurrected. She's some dead lady, getting chased down by a fraternity because it's her some odd great grandson who brought her back, and then he lost her, but she doesn't want to go back. Have fun with it.
Get back in the grave, Meemaw.
I had a do not resuscitate order.
But it was not a do not resurrect order.
True.
Points.
And now she's back in the grave. So like, have fun with it. Like, and I feel like that can also go into your backstories with, you know, how do we incorporate things that we as women face every day, or men face every day, or transgender piece, like going off, like, if we're gonna bring in this representation, let's not totally ignore what happens. Like, there is a, like, if we were all happy and fine, you know, women wouldn't be working in the home and all this. Like, let's make sure that if you're gonna bring in this diversity, you know, how does that fit into your world? And what are we gonna acknowledge about it?
I guess on that note, do you guys have any suggestions for if somebody is running a game or starting a campaign or even is playing in one, ways to incorporate in such a way that it's not kind of one note, I guess,
Or just an
or ways to
add-on.
encourage
or-
it from
Yeah.
their DM or their fellow players?
So I'm a fan of taking the like existing structures and then just messing with them. So for example, I would be curious to at least briefly explore a world where there was at least one culture where the concepts of what were considered to be, if there was a binary, if there was, what was considered masculine, what was considered feminine, and just completely jumbling it. Just throw it all in a box and then just split it random completely, and then just toss it up and just see where everything falls. And then what would that mean for what their concept of gender even is? Like, I like that kind of thing, because it sort of just tilts it and look at it from different angles.
Just put it all in a box, give it a good shake, and then throw it back out again.
Yeah, and be like, okay,
break
well,
it down
what
and
lands
rebuild
where?
it.
Yeah. And I think that's just like something that's I would find interesting to explore, and then see what type of characters you get from that once you've assembled it, and be like, okay, so what would the parents of my character look like if my character was from this place? What would that be? Are there two? Is it like a communal thing? Like, would it even be just a like two parents, or would it be three parents, or would it be a community raising the kids kind of thing? Like, just I don't know what it would look like.
And I think that's an important thing to bring up, because even today, that's a very, like, having two genders is a very Western concept that has just been pushed into the social norm. Like, there are two-spirit people from indigenous communities. You know, I'm trying to remember this other. It's like, I'm trying to remember. I can't remember the culture, but there is a culture where they believe that it's similar to two-spirit and being gender fluid, where it's like this person takes on both the roles that the women do in the community and the man, and they identify as both. And people are like, sick, this is great. So it's like, let's remember that this is a social concept that has been pushed. It's not everywhere.
And also, if you live in anywhere that was colonized, that entire different ideas about sex, gender, and sexuality existed on the very ground that you stand on for countless centuries before you got here, and your weird ideas are brand new and odd.
Mhm.
You're the weird ones.
Yeah,
You
Ah.
are
weirdos.
apparently.
Well, and as Ashley was pointing out in our chat, also just what constitutes men's or women's changes via history too. For instance, just looking at white Western type history, high heels originated from men.
So the color pink.
Red used to be a girl's color,
Yeah.
and
Pink was
wasn't
for boys.
pink- Yeah,
and
'cause it
pink was for
yeah.
boys. Like red and pink are now currently girls' colors, but they used to be boys.
And, like,
Because
blue
red
was
was a
more-
strong color, and blue was feminine.
Because it was like the calm color or something. Like it's all
Yeah.
arbitrary. And
Mhm.
like I think I said it before. Once I'm trying to remember because I did like my whole thing is linguistics. I'm particularly interested in language variation and change and also sociolinguistics and everything that applies to in terms of culture and social development, etc., and how that applies and like how socioeconomic status and your just everything is all connected, it's all integrated, and all you cannot disentangle them from each other. So, but just how much, especially language change, like specific, like it's like middle class woman in a specific like age group were like the ones who were the trendsetters, and then like the other people would start adopting it, but once it caught on it would get abandoned by the men and they would pick up something else, and it would just be this thing where it just kept shifting constantly all the way down, and it's just
I mean, for
None
an
of it's
easy
set
example of
anywhere.
that, tech used to be women's work. Doing math, being a computer was women's work until it started becoming seen as a science, and then now it's weirdly super sexist.
Yeah. Well, and at one point, men were the ones in charge of looking after children or setting how their children were cared for because women were too emotionally crazy to be able to handle any responsibility. So for the longest time, if there was a split for whatever reason, the father would have kept the children. Versus now it's much more the wife or the mother is more likely to get assigned custody of her children regardless, unless it can be proved in court that it would not be a good idea. So all these things shift extensively. So it's really, it is just a social construct.
Especially with the divorce, I've seen that screw people over because they just got sent to their mothers because the court thinks that a mother is a person who should be taking care of the children. And that is not always correct. It is, you're your own individuals. We make our own individual choices. Yes, women can be crazy. Yes, men can be crazy, but they can also be good and caring, as can men. And I hate social norms. Down with the patriarchy.
I was just about to start kicking things.
I'll get it.
The sword's back again. Yep, there it is.
There it is.
I need a mallet. Let's go.
I think it's important to bring it back to in the TTRPG space, because as these conversations are happening, you need to keep in mind that you don't have to impose these social norms in your D&D games or your TTRPG games in general, not just D&D. It can be whatever you want it to be. It doesn't have to follow those guidelines. You don't want to be the cis hetero white guy who is imposing sexual things on your feminine players. Nobody wants that. It's not okay. It breaks those norms. You don't have to be those guys anymore, nor do we want you to be. So if you're thinking that that's how D&D should be run, or any TTRPG system, you are incorrect. You should probably rethink that. But it's important to keep in mind that it's okay to be a male feminist or to be an ally to us. You don't have to be this masculine figure all the time for us. It's a collaborative story. We don't need those normals that we experience in real life all the time in our fantasy stuff.
And there's just so much room to enjoy it all in RPG, in that if you do identify with very what's considered, at least now, traditional feminine roles, you can be that. Like that's the other thing, is that feminism is not meant to be an attack against other women either, or saying how that you should be. You don't have to be the strong, tough person to be feminist. You don't have to be going out wielding your sword against whatever. If you want to stay home, look after your children, and make dinner, that's also okay if that's what you want to do with your life. But what's not okay is being forced to do that by everybody else around you. So I think that comes back into the RPGs of like, when you're running one or when you're playing in one, trying to think about how, if you are kind of pigeonholing your friends or fellow players or DM into certain roles.
I think the biggest thing is always let your players play how they want to play. Obviously, if it's getting kind of like not fun for anyone, then you step in and you're like, ugh. But yeah, like never rabbit hole your players. Like if they want to go off and they, they're like, say you meet like a really young character and you're like your character becomes a very motherly person to this young individual, that's totally okay. Or you become like a very strong protector in a less like caring and motherly way. It's like a very more stoic, like, this child is mine. So like let them play it how they want to play it. Don't put things in there expecting an outcome. Put things in there to see what they do.
And of course, like a lot of this is to do with, I think we're all talking from a place of having fairly good, solid, safe RPG groups. So if you are going out for a group that is maybe a public group, you're meeting up with people you don't necessarily know very well, you're trying to get into whatever group you can, it's stuff to pay attention to. And I think at some point you have to decide where your line is, how much you enjoy playing with these people, how much you think they'll listen if you want to try and raise, hey, something's making me uncomfortable, and when it's time to maybe cut your losses if you feel not safe in that space. But there is a lot more, and especially with having had COVID come through, the online community for this sort of stuff has exploded a lot. So there's more option now, which feels kind of great that people don't have to stay in a toxic situation in order to get their RPG needs filled.
As the subreddits for D&D that I am frequently on, as we have all agreed as our tagline, no D&D is better than bad D&D. And as much as it sucks, sometimes it's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I brought this up at the last panel, but ever since I saw it yesterday in the homebrewing panel, I just want to keep emphasizing it. Consent forms. Oh my gosh, consent forms. I know we use them at Fayfinders, but Tabletop Titties has in their resources on their website. I checked it out after the panel last night. It's a fantastic form to look at and send it to your players and get their comfortabilities. And I think it's a fantastic resource.
So, consent tools and consent forms and safety tools is actually something I'm extremely well versed in, as I'm working with Geek Therapeutics to develop an entire panel based around it. Did you know that the first session 0, which counts as a safety tool, was actually first noted in 1985? So any person who's like, oh, I've never heard of safety tools, what do you mean that's a safety tools have existed since 1985 at the very least? It was a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle game, TTRPG, that referenced it, which I think is really interesting. But Monty Cook Games developed the RPG consent forms back in 2013. The X-Car was made in 2013. Monty Cook's was made in 2019. So there is a safety tool that you can look at and research. There's plenty of people that have resources for you to use. Monty Cook's is, I believe, where Tabletop Titties originally developed theirs from. When I looked at it, it looked similar to the Monty Cook one, which is great. These are fantastic tools. If those don't work for you, there's red light, green light, yellow light, which is also a fantastic system. There's a lot that can fit at your table. So if these tools are like, that doesn't quite fit, there's plenty. I promise you, there's something that'll fit. And there's awesome tools for not only regular TTRPGs, but also for neurodivergent. So it's an excuse that you shouldn't use of, oh, well, that's not going to work for my table. There's plenty of resources out there.
And the fun part is that Google Forms is free. You can make your own based on what
Exactly.
you read. And if a part of it just doesn't feel quite right for you, you can take it out. You don't need to include it. You could also just include an other section if you're feeling like, oh god, I'm sure there's something I'm missing. Put in a box where it's like, if I missed something that you really want to address, to bring it up with me, fill it in here, right? And that leaves it for if your players have specific things that you just haven't thought of. Because honestly, with all of our experiences, each of us is individual, and you can't really be aware of everybody else's experience or what could be an issue for somebody else necessarily, because you've not lived their life. So don't beat yourself up if you don't know. Just ask if there's anything they want you to know.
Communication is a huge part of any table, so make sure you utilize it. It's probably your most important tool that you can have, if not one of the most important.
I want to step back from and talk more like high level about safety tools, or sort of how they can influence the table too. Because
totally.
I feel they're a really phenomenal way to sort of like set the standards for the kind of behavior that you expect at the table as a player and as a DM. And something that I think is really, really important is that they sort of like externalize blame to some degree should an incident come up. Because the table has agreed that this is the kind of behavior that you're going to take under. The table has agreed that these are the kind of safety tools that you have. And then when an incident happens, like, someone says a slur at the table, or someone does something that violates someone's like personal boundaries or something like that, and they know that tool exists to pause the game. They know that they've agreed to these things that this is violating. It's not now all on that individual to go, hey, I have to justify why I'm uncomfortable now. They can turn back to that session 0, to those consent forms, to those rules, and say, this is what we agreed on. These are the standards that we set at the start of this game, and I feel like we're not reaching them. And this is the tool that we agreed to use at that moment. It really takes a lot of the pressure off intervening. Or it can. It doesn't always, but it sure can.
Additionally,
that's a great
your
point.
consent is fluid. If you realize in that session 0 that maybe you didn't expect to be triggered or have an issue with somebody that they've done something, your consent is always going to be fluid. You can always revoke it or give it. It's okay if something comes up that you're like, this wasn't originally discussed. It's okay. Bring it up. It's all right. We all have those moments where we're like, wow, I didn't think that was going to bother me. It's okay to bring it up. And if you are uncomfortable to do so, maybe ask yourself why you're uncomfortable to do so. It's okay to ask those hard questions too.
You're allowed to refuse the tea. If someone's making it and all of a sudden you decide you don't want tea anymore, you're allowed to say no. You're allowed to
There you go, Ashley. That's a very good way to put that.
I don't know if anyone got those.
Consent is tea?
Did you not get? Okay, so there was a video.
Yeah. This was really,
reference,
really big in consent education a few years ago. I remember
I
showing
I just hadn't heard the consent is tea line specifically. Like I've heard the parallel and like I've heard that. I just hadn't heard the what?
Yeah, I hadn't really heard the line before, but I'd heard the concept.
Yeah. But then my brain's just like, well, now we talk about spilling the tea, and I'm just like, I feel like I'm mixing my comparisons here, and now I'm just confusing myself.
I don't know. I feel like at that point you might be taking the consent tea and just pouring consent over your whole game.
Yeah. Fair.
Spread that.
I think you can start mixing the metaphors a little, and it'll work. You just have to adjust how you're thinking of them.
I am good at mixing metaphors.
There.
I know in the chat we were talking about disability awareness, and that's something I really, really want to bring up.
Yeah, I do too. I think Remy asked, speaking of men who are like not stereotypically strong masculine, that they were reminded of Hiccup from How to Train Your Dragon, and going off the rest, just going to talk about portrayals of disability as well. And I honestly think disability rights is a feminist issue, so I am fully here for that.
As someone with a disability, I have both ADD and an anxiety and panic disorder that can really shut me down. And I know people like to portray panic attacks. Not everyone knows what a panic attack is. And I don't know if anyone's seen Puss in Boots, The Last Wish, where they
So
portray a
good.
panic attack. It was a great portrayal of a panic attack. And I was sitting in the room with my parents and they're like crying. They're like, oh my God, I feel so bad. And I'm like, yeah, this is what it looks like. So just like understanding when you're going to portray something as someone who does not have that disability, understand that you're coming from a place where you don't fully understand what's going on. Don't maybe describe certain details. Maybe if you're like, yeah, they start having a panic attack because they're so overwhelmed. Maybe don't go like, flashes, their tunnel vision's kicking in. Like be aware of how you're portraying it, because you might have someone at the table who hasn't told you that they have a disability, because not all disabilities are visibilities. So please be aware of how you're portraying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and in the long run, also with RPGs, there's so much ability to support and be inclusive. And we've been having some blowback in the last year or so. There was some blowback over disability representation in D&D, which was kind of disappointing, because honestly, in the long run, if you don't need it in your game or you don't want it in your game, you don't have to include it, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist and it isn't allowed to exist. And also, honestly, ramps in a castle make way more sense
so
than stairs,
convenient.
especially to a cellar or something. Like,
Uh-huh.
There's more opportunity
That'd
for
be
chaos
easier.
too.
right?
My first thought was like a spiral ramp down like a tower. I'm like, that would be so much fun.
like
just
slide,
like,
yeah.
oh.
Down that and like could
You
just
just
like
have, like,
roll
waxed
barrels down and like
carpets
take
to
out
go-
the bad guys.
Also,
Or
like,
it's a quick way to get
climb.
down.
Yeah.
Slide down. Oh my.
All you need
Okay.
is like a piece of like
Crazy
thick
carpet.
woven like carpet with wax on one side, and you just be so
Yeah.
much fun.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean,
Well,
knowing
yeah,
myself, if I ever needed a wheelchair, I would do dumb things in it. I would 100% try to pop a wheelie.
Also,
So-
all the people who are getting very upset about like the whole like combat wheelchair in D&D, have you not seen wheelchair sports?
Yeah.
They can do
Yeah.
insane athletic shit with
Uh-huh.
those things. Like,
It's
it's
insane.
amazing.
Murder ball. It's called murder ball for a reason.
An athlete
Yeah.
is an athlete regardless of what they might need for their sport.
Yeah. Like it's same with like I think it's sledge hockey. I'm pretty sure it's sledge hockey. Where you're in your
Yeah.
I don't know what it's called, the little thingy, and you're like
Yeah.
like it's
sledge.
just as
Yeah.
dangerous, if not
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, because it's on blades.
Well, and
Yeah,
on the
it's-
topic of like castles and staircases and whatnot, the really narrow little staircases that are really like hard to climb are a defensive feature.
Yes.
Like, that's all they're there for. They're there to make it harder to attack the castle. Because those stairs are uneven, and the winding means that you can't like charge up, which also was based on right-handed versus left-handedness, which is also an issue of representation in the world in general.
Lefties unite.
yeah.
Imagine having a staircase that like folds in, like like the trap ones that are like staircases and they so you slide down them. Imagine like someone who like, oh, what if they had like, I don't know, like a peg leg and they're able to like stick it in the side and like, haha, suckers, as everyone else is going down.
Or like everybody else is going down and they're in a wheelchair and they're really like buff fighter type and they're just like, fine. Yeah, they go all the way up.
This is
Like-
fun.
Like, if they've got like rubber wheels, they're gonna stick better than anybody else's
Yeah.
leather shoes. Like,
Yeah.
Like
Amazing.
see like how you can make it an advantage to your player that or player and character that has a disability. See what advantages you can give them, because in that in itself is representation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and
Yeah.
also just I think a lot of people forget that like poor vision and needing glasses is that's a disability. Like
I can see fine.
Not to call anybody out, I'm so sorry. But like, or
No.
like, I have ADHD. I need medications to function. Like, that is a disability. Like,
It's okay if you don't make your own neurotransmitters. You can buy them.
right?
Mhm.
Your brain makes dopamine on its own.
Yeah. Like,
How come your mom lets your
No,
brain make dopamine?
I have
exactly.
the broken reward system where I need that like instant gratification, and you know.
My mom said you can have dopamine if your mom allows it.
Oh my god.
BRB calling my mom. Hang on.
Oh, and
sorry,
Dear
Lisa
mom,
Beck
please
mentioned,
provide the dopamine.
My mom walked
D20
into
does
the
some
kitchen.
interesting stuff regarding addiction. That's one other to keep in mind, to be careful of,
Mhm.
because like that's something
Mhm.
that was used a lot in World of Darkness games as a flaw.
Mm-hmm.
And you do have to be very careful how you portray that sort of thing as well, because it is an illness in the long run. Like, it's not a choice for somebody to be addicted. So potentially that's something that you want to think carefully of before you try and put representation in your game. Look into resources regarding it and try and touch on it. But like we were saying earlier, maybe don't go into a really detailed description if you don't really know what it is, and consider how that's maybe stereotyped.
Mhm.
That
Absolutely.
really reminds me of when people choose to have their character be an alcoholic and they're overcoming it by going cold turkey. That doesn't work.
No, you could die.
You literally can die.
Yeah.
So whenever I see people like being like, yeah, my character's an alcoholic, it's like, okay, but make sure you understand actually how this works. Because the way you represent that is going to make the people who receive it go, oh yeah, that's possible. You can just immediately go into remission. It'll suck for like, I don't know, a couple hours. Like, no, it takes months.
Yeah.
Mhm. Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
especially
this feels somewhat connected to me to the topic of like not as big a thing in D&D, although D&D does have like madness charts, which is very something. But the idea of humanity in a lot of role-playing systems, like bringing up vampire, reminded me of like humanity and like even cyberpsychosis, and the idea of like the more like modified your body is because you need disability supports, the less a human you are, or the scale of humanity in vampire games can be deeply ableist in Portrayal. And if you're playing with systems like that connect like morality to humanity and body modifications, be really careful. Oh my gosh, be really careful, because that stuff is already on real shaky ground, and it's really easy to do some really, really abysmal portrayal that will make your table feel very unwelcoming to disabled or neurodiverse people in just like 2 seconds flat. So be very intentional and careful in any of that kind of representation that you do.
And touching on that is something I was watching recently, actually, that I just want to put the warning out there, is that a lot of people tend to use psychosis as short term for serial killer or something like that. As a murderer, nasty person, an evil person is psychotic. That's not true. A lot of people who have psychotic issues, etc., or actual medical terminology that delves into psychosis, are not bad people.
And they're more likely to hurt themselves.
Exactly. They're more likely to hurt themselves than anybody else. And they're not evil.
Well, or they're even more likely to be hurt by others.
Yeah,
I remember, and this is me talking about a tag that I've resisted putting on my own stream for quite some time. But I still remember the time joining a table, nothing to do with Dork Tales, a totally different crew. This was a year and a half ago, talking about joining a tabletop game. And one of the other potential players in it had this character that they described as having a personality disorder as like their flaw. And I'm sitting there going like, hi, borderline personality disorder over here. Please tell me about this and why you're so interested in portraying this and how you come to this conclusion with it. And it was just this massive argument. And I was like, yeah, I didn't end up playing with the group at all just because of how that one conversation went down. Because they just immediately used it as shorthand for like totally unstable and unpredictable. And oh my gosh, it was like they were describing chaotic neutral. It was just such a strange and deeply frustrating way to do it. And they
That's not a
handled
personality
my
disorder. That's just
inquiry
being a
so
dick.
poorly that I bailed on the whole table.
Yeah.
I've
wouldn't
had
blame you.
like 3 players that attempt to use, which is really strange. Like it's a wild number to have someone be like, yeah, I'm gonna have like voices in my head. It's like, do you understand what that actually entails?
Yeah.
Really? I have one who does. That this is something that they want to explore, that they are also dealing with. And if you're using it for that, that makes a little more sense. But if you're just using it as a character flaw, that's not really what that's for.
No.
That's not how people actually deal with it, view it.
D&D can be great
Yeah.
for disabilities. One of the first form of therapies I did when I like got diagnosed and all that was Dungeons and Dragons. It was for like, it was a group of us. One of my closest friends, we still hang out now. I met them from that group where we all sat down and we were going like, we made our goals each session of like, okay, what do we want to do today? Sometimes it was just, I just want something good to happen today. Other people, it was like, I want to work on like talking to people and feeling more comfortable talking to people. So I think remembering that D&D, not that it's inherently therapeutic, but I think it turns into being therapeutic because you get to kind of self-reflect on yourself because all of your characters have a little bit of you. So just being aware of like, maybe when your player is saying something, maybe it's not just the character.
Mm-hmm. I definitely have learned some things about myself from choices that my character made, especially when I did something that I thought made total sense. And then other players are like, why did you do that? What? And I'm just like, because point like A to B to C, like this is the process. I'm like, oh, you don't think that way. Interesting. Very interesting. I'm going to think about this for a bit.
Well, that's one of the great things about D&D is that, or any TTRPG really, is that you can try out different versions of yourself, essentially, different aspects of you or something that you want to work on. For instance, like, I don't know, 20 years ago, I could never have seen myself here. I was an intensely shy person.
Yeah.
To the point where, like, if I went out to the mall by myself to go shopping, I would not go to a new restaurant by myself because I didn't know what they had, and I was not willing to put myself in a situation where I didn't know anything. And, like, that sort of thing was actually, like, legitimately terrifying, which is very interesting that I'm now standing here, like, we're sitting here in front of
$50.
a ton of people that I do not know and have no idea who's there, and able to talk about all sorts of things and be very confident and, like, talky, which is all from like playing lots of RPGs.
Yeah.
Like doing all of this thing and having to pretend to be people. But also, you know what's really great is getting to dress up and play a character who gets to go and punch a misogynist in the face or something. Like,
Yep.
Our Victorian mage game on Dork Tales is fucking amazing. It definitely gets out all those feelings of just like sheer frustration and aggravation, even if it's not actively happening to me in that moment. There's a certain level of just feeling connected to other feminine people who are experiencing it. For instance, I think anybody who's been on TikTok maybe has heard that song going around, the Too Much Labor song. Potentially. Wow, that resonates. That resonates hard. Even just as like another feminine person.
I'll send it to you.
Totally.
It's very good.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
The music video for it as well. Oh.
I mean, any of the videos that have been going for it, it's just like everybody's taking it so well and it's just like amazing.
It's very good.
But yes.
when asked
just so
by
good to be able
a
to
friend of
explore.
mine, when asked by a friend of mine what kind of characters I play, I was like, feminine rage, the subclass. That's
Love
the
it.
archetype.
So
Sometimes
wonderful.
Oh, go
I'm
ahead.
just thinking, like, so I primarily play either like a lot more recently, like the non-binary or agender or just that kind of character a lot more often these days. Or I play a character who is distinctly feminine, like identifies as a woman, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there's part of me that wants to try playing a guy at some point, but at the same time, I'm like,
How do you do that? Yeah.
how do I do that? But also, okay, but I can do just as much stuff as a guy character as this other character that I already it's easier to dress up as. Like, I don't have to mess with my wardrobe as much. And it's like, well, there's not really a line there. It's a fantasy world. I can do anything. There's not really a restriction there because, like, magic.
Yeah.
I think when I play male characters, because I feel like I definitely have similar things. Like it's like I've played a non-binary fairy who worshipped the untitled goose. It was a great time. But whenever I play a man, I feel like I tend whenever it's for like a character I really enjoy, whether it's like one that I'm playing or for an NPC, and I really enjoy them, I feel like I always go flamboyant. And I think that's just a part of my personality that I love so much, and just putting pizzazz in. So I think if you're wanting to explore, different genders, put a little something of yourself in there to make it a little more comfortable, because when you're comfortable in your own gender, it can kind of feel a little weird to play a different gender or different identifying, what's the word? I guess like if you're non-binary, I can't think of the words properly right now. Because for people who struggle with their gender identity, sometimes D&D can be really good. Like one of my exes, he always played video games as the male. And when we were talking about playing D&D, he wanted to play a guy. And this is when he was exploring his sexuality. And internally, I'm like, oh, I know where this is going. Like, oh, well, this was a cute relationship for the time being. But you know what? It's really good. And I'm so happy to see him so happy. And sometimes these can be really good settings to let people explore.
Absolutely. I mean, we talked about it a little bit at the gender and identity and tabletop gaming panel yesterday, but I mean, D&D is how I explored femininity for myself too. And it's how I dipped my toes into it and checked to see if my friend group, some of these beautiful people, would be cool with a trans person amongst them. And then secretly we're all trans. Oh no. What did I say yesterday? It was JoJo's rules that stand users find each other, trans people find each other.
Oh, gay people, I feel like it's like we huddle. We're like,
Oops, all gays.
And you're very
we don't even know why though.
Sometimes
we
it's all give up.
don't do it consciously. Like so much of my high school friend group turned out to be queer people too, and none of us knew until after high school.
We did get a question in the chat. I'm trying to find it. It was basically, how do you play somebody of the opposite gender or of other genders or identifying different sexualities without making it feel like a caricature?
Like I said,
Yeah,
put a little bit of yourself in there, and just understand the possible impact you can be doing by playing this character as someone of that, not identifying of that gender.
If I find the question, I'll give them credit. I just can't find it. People are talking too much.
Stop talking.
Carefully and respectfully is definitely one of them. And I know there's been times in our games where Kelly has tried to portray, but has definitely I'm going to give him the credit of this, like agonized over it and tried to be as careful as possible because he didn't want to just be seen as doing something for representation purposes only or something like that. And I know he reaches out to a lot of the people in the group who have different representations, etc., to be like, hey, what do you think of this? Like, opinion wise, can I soundboard this? And there's been a few times where it's been very, very subtly done. And because I am one of the sounding boards, I knew about it. And it's so good to watch the people in the chat who do represent that way go, oh, I know what you're doing. And just seeing other people be so happy to be represented in a game is really, really nice. And you don't have to make it really blatant and obvious. You can do it with very few words and very just subtlety and just little things.
Her keys are on a carabiner.
Yeah, there you go.
She's gay.
That's a gay one over there.
She wears a baseball cap backwards and her hair is a shoulder length exactly. And it looks like she maybe cut it herself. She plays softball.
She's got a safety pin in one ear.
Mm-hmm. I think one thing that I think is really, really important when representing anyone of like a different social, political class, identity, gender, any of that stuff than you are, is knowing that they're like a person before they are that identity, and that if your perspective starts with who they are as a person before you bring in that identity, like it's a character sheet you're adding a splat to, I think you'll do a lot better in that modeling. Because unfortunately, that's not how we're taught to think about people, though, right? We're taught to categorize someone as a man or a woman, as a white person or as an othered, racialized person in so many different ways. Those are the boxes we put people in the moment we see them, and trying to bypass those boxes for yourself and see someone as a cool, rad individual at first who's impacted by these systems and categories and ideas can help you engaging with more people and building a cooler world and also telling cooler stories.
Mm-hmm. Like, sort of just in terms of things that I think are cool, are like, okay, so if you have like a country or something that happens to have the king as the head of state, who said the king had to be a guy? Because the king is the head of state. That's the position. It is not like anyone can be that role. It's just that is the head of state. You just happen
That's just
to
the
be...
title that is assigned to the person who occupies that position.
It's like, oh yeah, and their consort is the queen. I'm like, okay, I can accept that. Mm-hmm. Like, gender does not matter. That is the head of state and their consort. Why not?
Ta-da!
I love that.
I think going on kind of with what Bunny said of not making it feel like a caricature, remembering that they're real people, or at least you're trying to portray them as such. It doesn't immediately have to be a joke character, as much as we love our joke characters. We all do. Or portraying jokey NPCs. Make sure that you're not making what they are the butt of the joke. That, oh, they're a woman, but here's this other thing about them that is the butt of the joke. That's not that will help you not make them such a cartoony kind of caricature or a fake character. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, I like to know who the character is first, and then they happen to be gay. They happen to be queer. That's not their definition. It's just part of the rest of the melange that makes them awesome.
Yeah, so like, unless I was specifically wanting to have a story that explored those aspects, and that would be something, that would be a different conversation to have as well. Just, it's bonus. But yeah, I was thinking that if I did this, I was thinking like, if I did play a guy at some point, I almost wonder if I would just play it like I would play any of my other characters. They just happen to be a guy. I'm just like, I feel like I could do that. People might not think it was accurate representation of guys, but it's a fantasy and it's...
Well, who says?
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's also a very different power dynamic there.
Mm-hmm. True.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, honestly, like if it's something that you want to do, I think you should give it a go. Maybe it doesn't have to be in a fancy on-stream long-term game, but in a random one-shot, like you can go for it. I mean, personally, as somebody who role played a guy for like 23 years, I could only do it by putting a dramatic mustache on my face and going, gentleman all the time. So it's going to be up to you to do this one for me because I don't think I could do it.
I'm pretty good about jumping between femme and mask characters, depending on, like, as a TM, that's part of my job. That's what I do. But I do have a horrible thing where if I'm presenting as a male character or something, I have this horrible thing where I'll jump into a broken French accent, and I don't know why. It just happens. I accidentally did it with a blacksmith, and I was like, oh no. I was like, they're gonna come back to this blacksmith so many times now. Perfect.
There we go.
Awesome.
Excellent. Exactly everything I ever wanted.
There you go.
Very fancy mustache.
Does Blorp get a mustache too? I can't see.
I'd have to see if I can.
No,
Give
Blorb
him
has.
Does Blorp have a
different
little mini
glasses.
mustache?
Honestly,
I
doing
feel like
different
Blorp a little mustache. Hang on. let's see.
genders for your characters
Oh no.
very in a lot of ways it gives a different
Let's clear that.
he's lost his mustache off to the side.
A little bit of a space mustache, yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely important because your way of playing a male character isn't wrong necessarily, right? Like as long as you're not trying to like really portray a toxic masculinity stereotype, however you play a male character is how it works for male for you. And that should be okay if we're not getting tied up in toxic masculinity.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. That makes sense.
And even if you start looking at other things, like hell, look at the Romanticism period in England. It was fashionable for men to be all crying and weeping and like composing poetry over everything.
Like
Like
wearing heels, shoes with
Yeah.
heels.
heels to
Wigs
show off
are
their
bigger than the women.
calves and like writing poetry to each other, being sensitive, being like intent on this one view of like how the light's playing through the tree and stuff. Like that might get laughed at now, like looking at it, but it's all valid in the long run. So honestly, I think you almost can't screw up in some ways unless you're being stereotypical and portraying a one-note character, especially like
Which
Amy
is just a
playing a
one
male or
Meme
something.
about it,
characters. Like, yeah.
To be men or to be a male has changed, same as to be a female has had different definitions over the last 1,000 years. Like, so I think it's open. Don't be scared to try it if you want to, type thing, right? Like,
Fair enough.
I just want to say I would totally take down the patriarchy with all you lovely people.
I want to know when we're
Aw,
going.
the sweetest thing anyone's ever said to me.
You've got the swords. I'll spear or
let's get the
something.
date
Listen,
out and
I'm a
find out when
fencer.
We can do this.
We can do this. I'll train all of you.
Ooh.
okay, so you've got
have a
swords.
blade?
Let's go.
Okay.
I've
my
got like
goodness.
wrenches and like ratchets from my time as an automotive mechanic.
Don't
Yeah.
you have like an actual battle axe kicking around somewhere?
Yeah, the one I bought Kelly.
Yeah. you have
I bought
access
him
to
the God
that.
of War axe, like legit, like steelhead
Well, you're
war
just gonna
axe.
have to say, borrowing this, honey.
All of my
Mine now.
characters,
Yeah,
all of
like
my
he's
characters
like,
are
gonna
like-
say no.
Like a pirate cutlass, and I have a giant machete. So
all of my
kind
characters are arsonists, so like I'll just burn the picture. I
mean,
wish I
just
was
have a
lying. It's not
samurai
intentional.
sword. I
It
think
just
Mike
happened.
has one that I could.
We totally
I
have
play a wizard at some
Team
point.
Arson for a Victorian mage game because we burned
Yes.
down so many buildings.
Keep burning
Yeah.
things.
Team
yeah.
Arson.
y'all are beautiful. I love Team Arson.
And
Sometimes you just gotta
you
burn
can
down
get a
buildings.
t-shirt that says that, I'm pretty sure. Like we've
Yeah,
got
we have a
it in our
t-shirt.
stuff.
So yeah.
You can be
Love
on
that.
you can have,
Team Arson.
represent Team Arson.
Love that.
Yeah, I need to play as a character. I need to play a wizard with fireball at some point because I've never played a
Yes.
wizard with fireball, and I need to play this
Like,
character
yes, fireball.
not to cast it regular. I feel like I would avoid it until the perfect moment and only ever use it
Yeah.
once.
Mhm.
And
Fair.
I'd have to
Fair.
strategize for it. I need this
You would-
in my life.
well, you would have
rip
to
it out of
probably
your
have-
spell book afterward.
You would just need to have a
One
really
thing.
good conversation with your DM to plan the best
When is
opportunity,
the
so they could
moment?
give you the best scenario for it too.
Mhm.
Because there's no point just doing it by yourself. You might as well get as much bang for your buck as you can.
True.
So what I'm hearing is that we're gonna
Preferably
have a new
recently.
campaign where we all go after the patriarchy.
Please do not tempt me.
Paradox
Please.
is gonna be a wizard with fireball.
Actually, I already have 4 games that I'm working on. Don't add another.
What? I don't know what you're talking about.
That sounds like a great idea.
It does,
Which-
doesn't it?
If anybody wants to, like, also, like, our Victorian mage game is great, as well as the mage game we did as a break called Breaking Traditions, wherein the 4 of us ended up actually splitting off into 2 lesbian couples, which was incredibly amusing, and we had a lot of fun with that too. I think we did some pretty great representation. Amy, especially you and Jen, like, goddamn, you portrayed relationship problems just great. Robin and I were any different, but we had different relationship problems.
My character had ADHD and was basically kind of me with no direction in life and no job prospects.
What's everyone's favorite bit of representation that they've seen?
Oh,
Because I know for me, it's definitely been the Owl House recently.
I need to catch up on that. I started watching some.
Yeah, I think for recent representation, I'm really with you on the Owl House.
Yeah, and it feels good, and like watching that, I feel like I can watch it and I can go, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna do something like that on my game.
I think my favorite recently is the English on, I think it's Prime. But basically, English lady ends up like in the Wild West and searching for the guys who killed her son, and she's tough as fuck. But she also was like dressed in like fancy dresses, but then she kind of goes practical and she shoots and she's great and it's awesome. I love it.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I've been binging serial killer documentaries lately. You know,
Is that the
'cause
representation?
that's the jam. Well, I could say Monster by Charlize Theron. I mean, you know, Eileen Furness was no, that's kind of the wrong direction. But that's a good question. I guess any of the dramas that I watch that have a great lead woman character, and I have to say a lot of the Nordic noir has great women characters. So I don't know. I'm gravitating to them because they've got great detectives. They're written well and with flaws and it's very realistic, and I seem to think, I think, and also the women look like regular women. It's not very so Hollywood, which is just great. It's just like this woman looks her age and she acts her age, and it's not, you know, like, I'm a scientist or something.
This is the sum total of my personality.
Yeah.
Okay. I've kind of got 2 for very different reasons. One, bear with me, The Mummy, because the main character, because of the librarian, because I'm a librarian, just and being so out of her depth, but also just slaying at the same time, and it's like, yeah, beautiful. Yeah. So.
And you mean the
love
original
that.
Mummy with Brendan Fraser, right?
It's the only one.
Thank you.
We love and respect Brendan Fraser in this house.
Yeah.
Wait, asking this outside of the confines of Bossing Say, is there actually another Mummy movie I just didn't know existed?
Yes.
That is
Yes.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
It is
live
not
truly a
the
blessed
series.
life. Amazing.
Yeah.
I had to
I have not
explain
seen
this. I had to explain this to one of my professors because we were doing a movie night. Because I'm a part of the Archaeology Student Society.
Amazing.
And he kept emailing me because I just put it in anecdotally, being like, "Oh, if you want to come to our movie night," and he was like, "Which Mummy movie?" And it just got to the point where I walked down to his office and I'm like, "It's the one with Brendan Fraser. It's the Mummy."
Yes, it's the one that was
Only
probably the bisexual awakening for many people,
Facts.
Oh yeah.
just based on what I have heard anyway. But then my other one, just in terms of like more broad representation is actually going to be parts of Guild Wars too.
All right, yeah, I'm with you on that.
Nice.
Let's go off
Because you
Guild Wars
got,
game.
because I mean, like you've got Taimi, who is a brilliant scientist who has a disability for mobility and built her own golem to be mobile, and that is amazing. And you have canonical lesbians who are like just like love it. I love it.
Mhm.
Yep. No, it's pretty great.
A lot of very strong female characters to that too.
Yeah.
A queen who
I'm
rules
the
by
worst at
herself.
coming up with
Oh,
memory
yeah.
like this stuff. My brain is like, all of these shows, you can't think about them this way. But if you ever think about that show, you'll be like, oh my gosh, the character is such good feminist representation. But the two that's sprung to my mind is two that have been very inspirational to me, although I think they're both pretty flawed, which is, of course, Sailor Moon and Xena, because they're just so much fun.
Fair.
I will always come back to Star Trek and Janeway, as well as Seven of Nine, who we get to explore humanity in a way that we don't normally get to see, with her being a Borg, as well as any Doctor Who. I love Doctor Who in general, huge Whovian. But something that I will always reference that I realize it's a show that's almost 10 years old now. I'm a big BoJack Horseman fan. Princess Carolyn is something that I very much identify with throughout her flaws, and she has them. You get to see a lot of that, but it also has a lot of queer representation in the way of Todd, who, while not femme, is asexual. I love Todd. I
lost my mind when I found out he was asexual. I was just like, fuck yes.
And it's a very good representation of that.
No, but yes.
It's like, no, but yes. But BoJack Horseman is great for that. I think Princess Carolyn's probably my favorite, and you get to see Diane as she goes through her mental health and everything that she's trying to deal with that, and her relationships falling apart. But I think that's a great representation with all of their flaws, because that's the point. But Doctor Who, Star Trek, and Wonder Woman, all kind of where I started off with.
Wonderful. Yeah, so wow, I think we've gotten through a lot, and we've touched on a lot of different topics, and we're coming up against the end of our time at this point. So yeah, I think thank you all for being here. And is there any last kind of like thoughts before we go into outro stuff? Any last points you wanna
Is it
make?
still okay to punch Nazis?
Well, duh.
Okay.
I mean,
Like by definition, if you are defined as a Nazi, you are punchable.
Just because there's been questions about, well, who's safe to have as a villain? Nazis, always Nazis.
Oh yeah, always Nazis.
Paradox of tolerance is a very easy thing to lean on there. It's the idea that if you want to have a like inclusive and tolerant quote unquote space or society, you need to exclude those who would make it intolerant. And sometimes that might require force.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go be a feminist and support not only women, but also people with disabilities, people with who identify as queer, and within the LGBTQ plus community. Support diversity and equity. That is the biggest. I hope
diversity makes the world more colorful and more interesting and fun. And why would we want to be one note? Let's have the whole gamut of notes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm down for the slogan. I've seen it. I've seen a couple of different ones. Women's rights are human rights. Trans rights are human rights. It is all about human rights.
Yeah,
all of it. That's. And if you want to go to the cliche phrase, a rising tide floats all boats. So we're only going to improve society for everyone.
Does that mean in the long run, feminism is not here to take anything away from anybody besides your ability to make slaves of us? So that's really all white cis male patriarchy is controlling other people. Yeah. So slavery's wrong, yo.
It turns
we're
out,
all-
big
we're-
plot twist at the end of the panel.
Whoa.
In the long run,
Bodily
you can
autonomy.
conflate both things. So stop telling me what to do with my body.
Yeah, body autonomy. That's the
Mhm.
thing.
So we're all gonna meet up in the parking lot later.
All right.
Which one?
I'll
Is
get
it
on a
a
plane
dense
right now.
one or what?
In the
What do
long
we-
run, me having rights over myself does not take anything away from your rights over yourself, aside from what you suppose to be your right to tell me what to do. Which you never really had in the first place. You just had more force to enforce it. So
If what I do does not affect you negatively, buzz off.
And your
Basically,
feelings
right?
being hurt does not count.
No,
No.
unless
By
it's like in a really
inconvenience.
horrible way.
Yeah. But it's like if you're like, oh no, you're not doing what I told you to do. I'm inconvenienced. Oh, I'm gonna go be angry. It's
I'm gonna go with Kelly's no, I'm not gonna no. I was gonna be like, Kelly told me I could say fuck off, but no, I'm gonna say buzz off.
I don't have to.
it was
I won't listen to a man.
stated as a suggestion of ability. That there is no rules against it. But
I guess like just zooming back to tabletop games a little bit too. Like I think when it comes to gaming, this is really a way to make your game more interesting, to get more people to the table, to make your games more fun and more rad and like more cool. And like you want to be cool, right? I'm peer pressuring you right now. If you don't want to do this, you're kind of boring. Like you want to be hip and not a square. Only squares aren't feminist, but they're tabletop role playing games. Yeah.
I was on a shirt, I'm not gonna lie.
Only squares are not feminists, but they're tabletop role-playing games. Quote, a bunny who's peer pressuring you right now to be cool. Wear sunglasses.
I've been given
Very,
wise
very
advice by a
specific
bunny in
quote.
sunglasses.
I want
Yeah.
the thing where you add like the gun hand. I want that of funny.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
I can probably do that. Hang on.
Can I get that? I would love that. I need to add it to my little army.
Here, I'll find a transparent PNG. Hang on, it'll take me a couple minutes.
Bless you.
but I think at that note, I think we should go around and say who we are, where you can find us, any last thoughts. Let's start with Kel and work our way back around.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for everybody watching. I'm Cal from up the road, and I'm usually here if I'm anywhere, hanging out with Dork Tales. I have an Insta. I post weird stuff, either plants, my cats, knitting, all that good fun stuff. And yeah, this was great. I love having these kind of discussions, and this was a great panel. I really enjoyed meeting you both, Ivy, and I'm sorry, I forgot your name, Alwyn.
Ashley, but that's
Ashley, thank you.
okay.
Yes, Ashley and Ivy, come back anytime. We'll come hang out with y'all's too. So thanks, everybody. This was great.
All right, moving over to Ashley.
Hi, my name's Ashley Elizabeth. I am the Dungeon Master for Faith Finders. You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. We're also on Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. I'm the Dungeon Masters for our current campaign of Cosmos, but we also have Amnesia going on right now, which is a campaign where you literally get to watch the players not only learn about their characters, but also learn their character sheets as they play along. And I think that one's pretty fun. I've been enjoying it. My pronouns are she, her, and it was very lovely to be on this panel with all of you. I love this so
Thank
much.
And we love you. Like, seriously. This has been amazing. And moving over to Ivy.
Hi, I'm Ivy. Pronouns are she, her. I'm Gamer the Girl everywhere that you can possibly find me. I'm the Dungeon Master currently over at Dice Cream Sandwich. We just finished up a level 20 Avernus game where you can go see the likes of Christian Navarro and a Harley Kane and Nerd D and all of my lovely cast from that. As well as I have 4 upcoming TTRPG streams that are being worked on. So if you're interested in watching those, I'm the founder and CEO of the Crit Awards, which is Creator Recognition in TTRPGs. So if you want to go and nominate Dork Tales or Fae Finders or any dice makers or podcast makers or anything, we have 41 categories. You can go nominate all kinds of fun people, and everybody gets an award for the categories they've been nominated. They're really cool. As well as I'm one of the founding members and committee members of Rolling for Charity, where we do 24-hour charity streams raising money for different causes. We've been going on for 3 years and raised about $20,000 for different charities. So if you're interested in participating with that, I'm also the PR coordinator over at Geek Girl Con in Seattle. So if you have questions about that, you can always send me an email, and that's me.
Wonderful. Millie.
I totally was on a different window for a moment. Hi, I assumed I would not be next somehow, despite being next. Hi, I'm Millie and or Bunny Hearted. My pronouns are she and her or they and them. I'm some sort of a doofus 90s VTuber bunny girl who does comfort and cozy things over at twitch.tv/Bunny Hearted. And I do my best to feel like an inclusive and welcoming kind of space that is perhaps full of a lot of chaos. I'm also very often here on Dork Tales, and I'm really proud of what this community has accomplished and to be a part of this community. And I want to continuously shill for this community and encourage y'all to type !, type an ! Incentive in chat. I also have decided, remembering who I am as a person, not to randomly point a gun at chat without giving them a heads up on it. So I'm not going to put the PNG. I went and downloaded it and I was like, oh, right, this is literally a gun. Never mind. For some reason, my brain was like, it's like a water pistol. It's not. So I'm not going to do that. But know that I am peer pressuring you to make your games cooler and to support rad tabletop gaming spaces like this one. Peer pressure. I'm a peer now. It's because you're cool. Therefore we're peers.
Wonderful. That means you can peer review us then. That's great.
Scientifically.
Speaking back about the history panel, that was just last time. Amy.
Hello, that is me. I am Amy. I am Paradoxical Ghoul on Twitch and on Discord, where I run the Dork Tales Discord server. I live there. I am almost always just I'm just there.
It's true.
I live there. It's my home now. I'm not allowed to leave, I don't think, ever. And I sometimes will stream on my own channel, various video games. I have been lax on that. Forgive me. I'm very sorry. I promise I will do more. There will be more screaming. Me screaming, not anyone else, usually because I've failed at hitting something and I'm being stabbed by something.
I mean, if you start hunting down the patriarchy, there might be other people screaming.
That's true. I don't know that that's available in any of my video games. I'd have to double check.
Well,
I'm sure there's something on there that you can go hunt the patriarchy.
Hang on. I can absolutely recommend.
I mean, I could go play more Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I think that kind of works. Maybe.
Sure. It's going to send you to itch.io.
A little bit, I know. Yeah, that's me. And
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us. And I am, I still am. I will be in the future, Christine. I go by Lady Liliana in the chat, and you can find me on my own channel, generally on Sunday mornings, where I stream Guild Wars 2 and sometimes other games, depends on how I feel about it. But thank you all so much for joining us. And thank you so much for this wonderful discussion about feminism and taking down the patriarchy and inclusivity and all the fun-ivities.
It was an amazing panel.
Probably yes.
Thank you very much for moderating it and helping to sort questions and keep us on topic, and being so much fun in our secret chat over here, which we read most of out to people.
Yeah,
it's been really nice chatting with all of you.
And I'm sorry, I got very excited and I was very yelly.
That's the point of this panel.
You were great.
Yeah.
Also, things to apologize for.
As we head out, I have provided a Super Soaker pistol for Millie. There you are, Bunny Hearted.
Did you send it to me in what format?
No, it's literally on your frame.
On the Twitch screen.
And I've given one to Amy and Ivy and Ashley,
amazing,
Christine and Kel. You all have Super Soakers and can go and spray the patriarchy.
Hang on, which side is it?
The spraytriarchy.
Kind of grab it.
Spraytriarchy.
It's on your left side.
I'm gonna get my gun.
Can you fill it with cat piss and shoot the patriarchy? Yes, yes, you can.
The cat
I'm well stocked up
patriarchy?
on that. Yeah.
I'm a charity, or like I'm a tabletop stream, not a cop. I don't care. Folks, that is going to be it for this episode. We're going to be back in about 15 minutes with games you should be playing, where we discuss all sorts of tabletop games that you may not have heard of that are not Dungeons and Dragons, but will bring you an amazing gaming experience. So you definitely want to be there. It's a fantastic panel that is going to be hosted by none other than our very own Krista, and we'll be back with that in just a couple minutes. Thank you so much for bringing the feminism. Bye, everybody.
Thanks
I guess
for
I don't know.
Take care,
Someone else say goodbye. So it's not a dude saying it.
Goodbye.
Bring-